Welcome to Project Foodie. My name is Daniel Holzman. I'm the chef and owner of the Meatball Shop restaurant in New York City.
I take after my grandmother. My grandmother was a huge fan of tiny balls.
I didn't say it! This cook-along system is based on the way that I train cooks in my restaurants. We cook everything together. So I'm gonna be here with you for every second of the process until your meal hits the plate. Feel free to hit pause, rewind, or slow it down whenever you need to. You've just selected summer vegetable frittata with a side green salad. This recipe has 3 simple steps and should take about 30 minutes. We are about to embark on a journey down frittata lane. This summer vegetable frittata with a side green salad is one of my absolute favorite go-to simple, fast, delicious dishes when I've got a bunch of veggies in the fridge that I need to utilize. It's super versatile because you can swap out with whatever vegetables you prefer, provided you follow these really easy instructions to make basic frittata. First and foremost, I want to gather all of our ingredients and have everything sensibly laid out. In a restaurant, we call this mise en place. It means having everything ready at a hand's reach for when you need it. First and foremost, we want to preheat our oven and get our veggies chopped and cooking. We're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're going to chop our veggies. The base of our frittata is going to be onion and fennel. The onion, I'm using a red onion because I love the color, and it's a nice sweet onion. I'm going to cut the top off, and we're going to actually cut the bottom off of this guy. And I'm going to cut them in half and then peel them. A lot of times when I'm cutting an onion, we like to dice it, so I leave the bolster end on so that it holds together. But in this case, we're actually gonna slice the onion because it's gonna add some nice texture to our frittata. So I'm cutting the top and the bottom off because I want the little pieces to fall apart. And there are a couple of choices you can make when you slice an onion. Obviously, one of them is you can slice it into half moons, which is a great option. And then the second one is you can slice it Parisienne style, or in the same direction as the onion longitudinally. So we're going to kind of cut starting at a deep angle into slices in this direction. And the reason I like to do this specifically is that first and foremost, by its very nature, when I cut this size, this direction, all of the onion pieces will be the same size, versus here if I cut a half moon, you can see that I've got some big pieces and some little pieces. Well, we prefer, for this particular dish, for them all to kind of be the same length. And then secondly, and more importantly, if you look at your onion, there's some fibrous kind of lines that run this direction. When we cut them into half moons, after I saute them and cook them for a long time, they tend to dissolve and fall apart. So when I want to cook the onion and I want it to disappear, I cut it in that direction. When I want to cut an onion in a way that will I'll be able to see those pieces of onion even after it's been cooking for a long time, we cut it Parisienne, or along the same direction as the fibers, and then the onion will hold together better. So we've got our onion cut over a medium-high flame. We're just going to saute with our olive oil these onions. And the fat plays a really important part in our frittata. It's going to make it really moist and delicious. So I'm not afraid to use a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of, if it seems like a lot of butter and a lot of cream. I'm cooking for flavor. If you want like a super healthy meal and you're like that egg white character that doesn't want to put anything in there, that's completely fine. You can just make your frittata not taste that great. So, our onions are in a pan. We want to sweat these onions, and to sweat the onions, rather than caramelize them, I'm going to add salt at this point. By adding the salt in early, it actually draws moisture out of the onions and will help them to stew in their own water, rather than if we were to just cook these over a high flame without any salt. They tend to cook dry in the oil, fry, the sugars caramelize, and you get caramelized onions. They're brown, it has a delicious flavor, but for this particular recipe, I would prefer a sweated onion. So we can just kind of give those a little toss. We have a non-stick pan, which is very sensitive to metal spatulas and such. So I like to use a rubber spatula to just kind of move things around, so I know I'm not going to scratch the non-stick coating off of our pan. And this is such a great tool to have around, which is just basically a spoon rest that I always have something to stick a spoon on so I'm not putting my dirty spoon down on the stove. Secondly, we can add some butter. Our butter is going to be part of the base of our frittata. So we've got butter and olive oil, and we're cooking our onions, at which point we can now cut our fennel. So fennel grows similarly to an onion in a bulb, right? And so it has a bolster on one end. It's a little bit bigger than an onion. But what we want to do is basically just trim off the top stems. And then I'm going to cut it straight in half, just like I would an onion. But if you look on the inside, you can see that that bolster is quite big. And it's really great if I'm going to roast fennel. I can slice it into kind of wedges and it'll hold together and roast really beautifully. But for this particular dish where I want it to look kind of like the onions, you guys, can you hear them are sizzling quite aggressively? We could just turn this down a little bit. I said medium high, but I want it real high. So give them a little toss. So this guy here, you can see the bolster. We want to cut that out. And to cut that out, I'm going to just kind of place it on our cutting board at an angle and cut. I like to use my knife cutting straight down, but I'll leave the vegetable at the angle where if I cut straight down, I can make a V in this direction, and then make a V in this direction, and cut that bolster straight out. So now, these pieces of fennel would just kind of peel apart and make all the layers would fall apart. So again, on both sides, we can just kind of cut. And then the same way that we cut our onion, we can go with our fennel into some slices. And you notice that I'm starting kind of at an angle flat to the cutting board, and then as I get closer to the top of the fennel, we're coming more vertically down. So starting at this angle, straight in, and then as we come close to the top, maybe at that point, the horizon, or at the perpendicular line, we're perpendicular to the board. And then to make it easier for myself, when it gets thin, I flip it over and just kind of make the last few slices with a nice wide base. So these guys can go right into our pan as well. You can see that there are going to be a lot of veggies in this frittata. So the egg of this frittata is going to bind together all these vegetables that are cooking, but the egg is just one ingredient, not necessarily the main ingredient. For this frittata, the vegetables are going to be the star of the show. So at every step, we've got time to take a moment and clean up. And even though the frittata takes about 10 minutes in the oven with the egg, the real time is going to be cooking down these vegetables and making sure that we build the flavor and the sweetness. We're not in a rush because you don't want to throw the eggs in there, bake them, it'll set, but then you got crunchy raw fennel, which isn't going to be our ideal. So give these kind of a toss. And we're just going to let these cook, again, for probably 5 to 7 minutes until these have softened and we're ready for the next. But we can prep the rest of our veggies, which are our zucchini. So for this guy, I think we could just trim off kind of the ends, and then we want to cut this in half, but you can see that it's got a curve in it. So if I were to cut this in half like this, the actual zucchini wouldn't get cut in half perfectly. If I roll it, however, like that, now you can see that the curve is bottom to top, and we can cut the zucchini straight in half. And then we'll just go ahead and make some slices that are nice half moons. About a 1/4 inch, so a nice thin, but not so thin that it's going to disintegrate and we're going to lose all the texture. We hope that these zucchini will be added and have a little bit of kind of a toothsome quality to them, where everything else will be a little bit soft. So our onions and fennel will be nice and soft, but the zucchini will still have a little bit of snap to them. We don't want our mushy zucchini. So our onion and fennel is cooking. Our zucchini is cut and off to the side. That's going to be the next vegetable that goes in the pan. And now we can prep our herbs. We've got some tarragon and parsley and chives, which are a really classic combination. A French combo of fine herbs. It's just missing chervil. Chervil is like one of my favorites. It's got this crazy, delicious flavor, but it's really hard to find because it's super tiny, tender, little dainty leaves that tend to wilt very quickly, so you can't find them in supermarkets. You kind of gotta buy them in bulk. But parsley and chives and tarragon are a really delicious combination that make for a very fresh flavor. I'm giving it a little toss to be fancy. Very easy actually to do by just kind of pushing forward and then pulling back. So you push forward, it goes up. Off the side of the pan, you pull back to make sure you're catching it all. But realistically and ultimately, using a wooden spoon is going to work just fine. So feel free, or a rubber spatula, to give yourself a mix. So we're picking our parsley. And this is going to get chopped up pretty finely, so I'm not overly careful with some of the more tender, small stem pieces, but the larger, thicker, woodier end, I want to make sure we leave out of there because no one wants to get a big old piece of parsley stuck in their teeth. So we've got our parsley stems. We can get rid of those and discard them. We've got our chives, which we're just going to slice into little, little rings, and then the tarragon. Tarragon is a very delicious, distinct flavor that's similar to fennel or the chervil. It's got kind of almost a licoricey flavor. It's really easy to pick. Again, you've got some kind of tender stem at the very tip, but the end over here is quite woody, and even more so than parsley, you would really want to make sure you don't find that in your food. So I just kind of, using my fingers, peel down the tarragon. You can see it will take the woody stem out, but I'm left with a little bit more that I can just pick off. So the tarragon and the parsley will go right into my little pile over here. Tarragon has a very distinct flavor. It tastes just like, tarragon. It's a little licoricey. It's got a little bit of anise flavor. It's got like a tiny, tiny bit of subtle spice, but it's very hard to describe. It's very much its own flavor. They make tarragon soda in Russia. That tarragon is a very flavor. It's like a very, very popular flavor in Russia. So you can see our veggies are starting to soften a little bit. They're going from that kind of like opaque raw to just a little bit translucent. I've got a tiny bit of color on there. I said no color, but a little bit of color isn't going to hurt us. And put the rest of our salt in with the veggies to help them soften. Continue cooking. We can chop our herbs, so just using the curve of the knife with our fingers on the end, holding it down, give ourselves a little chop. And again, I think these pieces will look really nice if they're quite fine. The idea for me is that we're going to mix all of this in with the eggs, and the mixed herbs with the eggs is going to make a really beautiful kind of full of veggies look to the frittata. I don't know if you've ever seen when you mix kind of the herbs into an omelet or into a frittata, it looks really beautiful. So I'm excited about that. So give our herbs a little chop. And then actually, we can add our chives in. So these chives look a little rough at the edge. You can give them a slice and maybe discard some of these kind of rotten ends, wilted ends. And then we're just going to slice the chives into little rings. And again, this is going to look very beautiful. The little ringlets of chives. Chives are in the onion family. They're like a great way to add a raw onion to a salad when you don't want that really sharp onion flavor, because the chives themselves are quite mild, so you can eat them raw. Although, depending upon what the season is and where you get them, I've had some chives that can be quite sharp, so you might want to give them a little taste and see if you're planning to eat them raw. In this particular case, we're cooking them, so it's extraneous, confusing information that you don't need to know about. All right. We got our onions cooking with our fennel. Give it a little mix with our spatula. And at this point, if you're not sure, I'm feeling like my fennel might be soft, but I'm feeling like it might be too crunchy, you can take a piece out, maybe one of the bigger pieces, slice a little bit off of it, and give it a taste. I still do have a little bit of texture in there, but Fennel is very, very crunchy. And this has a soft, kind of like toothsome, not mushy, but a little toothsome, but it's quite soft. It's not crunching in my teeth. I can't hear it kind of crispy. So that would be perfect now point for us to add our zucchini. And I'm just going to kind of scatter that around, making sure that these pieces don't stick together. They tend to kind of want to stick together after they're sliced, so just using my finger to break them apart. Get our zucchini right in there. And then I also have some arugula. Now, arugula is generally something that you see as a salad ingredient, mostly, although I do use a lot of arugula in pesto. I'll kind of like grind it up, or I'll even blanch it, cook it quickly in hot water, and grind it up and make it into an arugula pesto. It is quite versatile. I love arugula because it stands up well. It's got a great texture. It's a little bit spicy. And in this case, I'm going to use it kind of like an herb. So I'm going to chop this up as well to add to the frittata. And that's going to add a lot of interesting flavor and a little peppery quality that I think is going to go very well. So this is going to be finely chopped, just like the herbs. And once we chop this up, I'm actually just going to mix all these herbs together and give them a final little chop. So there's all of our herbs. You can hear the frittata talking to us over here. So it's kind of giving us a little, hey, I'm crisping up pretty fast here, man. Are you sure you want me cooking that quickly? And the answer is, yeah, chill out, because that zucchini's got a ton of moisture in it. And so by adding that in, now that I stir it over to the bottom, the moisture from the salt and the heat of the other vegetables is going to draw out, and that's going to slow it down. So I'm definitely not in a rush, but I want to cook this through. So got this guy going, and what we're going to do is, our plan is we're going to mix the eggs with all these herbs, and then we're going to cook some of the cream, reduce it down with the vegetables, and then we're going to mix the vegetables and the eggs and bake them for step 2. So we've got our veggies cooking, our herbs are chopped and ready, and that is the end of step 1. Secondly, we're going to whisk our eggs, get them mixed into our pan, and get our frittata in the oven. It is time to embark on step 2. So for step 2, you can go ahead and, as we always do, take a moment to just tidy up. The herbs that we've chopped, I can put them in our big bowl where we're going to crack all of our eggs and whisk together. Get all this kind of delicious herbs up in there, and carefully scraping them up with our knife so we don't cut ourselves, but we get all of it. And then I like to just make sure that I don't have any of these residual herbs left over on the pan, because you're just going to get in my way and make it difficult for me to continue. Our frittata, you can see that the zucchini, I don't know if you can see this, but they're just starting to sweat. You can just start to see that they've gone from the crisp kind of zucchini to these little bit flaccid and soft, and that is exactly where we want before we add our cream. So we're going to add our cream right now to the pan, and the cream is going to slow down the cooking. It's going to reduce, and it's going to coat all the veggies, and it's going to add the fat that's going to make this frittata really, really rich and moist, and give it a certain, like a very substantial quality. Sometimes frittatas can feel a little bit dry and boring. The cream really gives it an amazing, rich mouthfeel that you're going to love. And we can crack our eggs. So I think we all know how to crack an egg. I've heard that if you crack it on a flat surface, you're less likely to get shell. So I'm going to go ahead and listen. Although frankly, I have not seen any evidence that you get less shell in any case. So our eggs go right in. Got some shell in there for sure. Eggs go right into the bowl with our herbs. If you're super cool, like chef style, you crack both of your eggs with 2 hands like that. And if you're really cool, you admit that you just got a bunch of shell in your frittata, and you can exhibit one of the coolest tricks of all time, which is that it's almost impossible to pull a shell out of the egg with your finger. However, for some reason, shell attracts shell, and if you want to get a shell out, you use a shell and you can just scoop the shell right up. I do not know why shells have a shell magnetic quality, but it is a great way to scoop shell out of egg, and it will save you some frustration. So we've got our herbs, our eggs in our bowl. Give our hands a little rinse. Got a tiny bit of egg on our cutting board that I'm just going to wipe off because we don't need any raw eggs sitting around. Double check our frittata here and maybe give it a stir, and you can see that the cream is pretty much bubbled to dry, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want any cream visible. We want it basically all to be absorbed by the veg and nice and dry. So at this point we can put some salt in our eggs and give ourselves a whisk. So just kind of want to break up any of the yolks and whisk together the herbs and the eggs. And this is quite thick. It's quite thick mixture of all these herbs, and that's going to be really, really beautiful together, and it's going to make our frittata awesome. So that's all that takes. And then we're going to season the eggs with some black pepper. And remember that it seems like I'm putting a lot of pepper in there, but we're not just seasoning these eggs, we're seasoning all of this as well. So now with our rubber spatula, give ourselves a final stir. You can see that the veggies are nice and hot. The cream is almost completely reduced, but it hasn't broken, or it's not oily, and that is the perfect moment now. What we're gonna do is just stirring this guy. Gonna pour it, try and pour it evenly over all of our eggs, and then that's gonna go right in the oven to finish. So our eggs are gonna pour evenly over the vegetables. Oh yeah, that's gonna be amazing. I can use our spatula to just scrape out any extra last little bits. I'm going to give us one quick stir with the spatula just to make sure that the egg there are no pockets of vegetables that didn't get any egg in there. So just a little last stir. That's also going to help speed up the cooking process. And then we're going to go straight into the oven with this frittata. And this is going to cook for about 7 minutes. I'll show you exactly how we can test it. It's very, very simple and easy. And now, with our flame off, our frittata baking, we can make our vinaigrette. So that is the end of step 2. Final step, we're gonna make our vinaigrette, dress our salad, rest our frittata, serve, enjoy. We've got our frittata in the oven, and now we're gonna make our green salad. So as promised, we're gonna do double duty on our whisk and bowl here, and we're gonna clean it out and make sure that we've sanitized our raw egg. So give ourselves a nice scrub, and I'm gonna use this whisk one more time because we're gonna make our vinaigrette right in this big bowl. So got our big bowl here, nice and go. Give ourselves a little dry. And I misspoke. We're not going to make our vinaigrette in here. We're going to mix our salad in here. So we can take our salad greens, which I was just holding in this little bowl, drop them in there, and now we're going to make our vinaigrette in this little bowl. So to make our vinaigrette, which is very, very simple, we're going to start with a shallot. And what we're going to do is just peel this guy. It's a big shallot, so actually I'm only going to use half, but we're going to peel this guy by cutting off the bolster or stem end very close to the end, just like we would an onion, and then we're going to cut off the other end, getting rid of all of that outside peel. And then using the tip of our knife, we're just going to slice down gently, cutting through one layer so that we can peel off the tough outside skin, just like we would an onion. And then we're actually going to slice this just like we did an onion, but instead of going all the way to the end, we're going to slice it so that our knife only cuts about this far all the way through. And we're going to cut it as thinly as possible. So just a little slice straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down, straight down. And it might be easier for you to use a smaller knife, so a smaller knife you can use. And now that we've cut it into these pieces here, we're going to cut in this direction. 1, 2. At which point we can now go down in this direction and we will make little tiny mince shallot, which is going to be the base of our vinaigrette. Now, if you were not quite as successful with your shallot, so your pieces maybe were some of them a little bit bigger and a little bit clunky, you can feel free to go back through and give yourself a little chop to make nice small pieces, because shallot can be quite strong. It has a delicious, sweet, sharp flavor, but you don't want to eat any raw big chunks of shallot, so giving it an extra chop is going to be a great way to ensure you get a nice even mix of these pieces in your salad. So put our shallot right into our bowl. Give ourselves a little wipe to clean. At which point we're going to add our Dijon mustard. And Dijon mustard is going to be what holds this salad together. The vinaigrette is going to emulsify the oil and the vinegar together. Water and oil will stick together if they are emulsified with protein, and the protein is in the mustard. So the mustard is in there, the shallots are in there, our red wine vinegar goes in the bowl, a pinch of salt, and a fresh grate of black pepper, at which point we want to whisk it together. And what you might notice is that your bowl kind of swirls around like that, which is a little bit difficult. And if that's the case, you can always put it on a towel, which will generally keep it from stirring. If it doesn't, because it doesn't, what we do in the restaurant is we'll make like a circle like this, make a circle out of that, and then rest the bowl in an actual little home. And gently and carefully, we're going to very slowly drizzle a thin drizzle of olive oil in while whisking quickly. And that is going to help to emulsify our oil and our vinegar together and make a really delicious, thick vinaigrette that is going to coat our salad. And this is a great skill that is absolutely worth practicing and getting good at, because making an emulsified vinaigrette is something that you can impress all your friends with. It's definitely something that when I'm feeling like I need to go out and blow off some steam and have a great time, I'm out at the bar, I brag to all my friends about my emulsified vinaigrette, and they are, let me just tell you, wowed. Wow factor is, I'd say, 10. Wow factor 10. For me, when I'm making a vinaigrette, or I like to use a very light, neutral flavored olive oil. One of the more expensive olive oils are really for finishing. They have a very strong, spicy flavor, and when mixed with acid, they can have an off-putting bitter quality. So you can see that our vinaigrette is kind of thick and sticking together. And the shallot is crispy and delicious. You put that to the side. And our frittata has been in the oven for 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So I'm going to just give a little peek. So using a dry towel or pot holder, you never ever grab anything with a moist towel from the oven, because the moisture in the towel can boil spontaneously and then actually find its way through whatever the cloth is and burn your hand very, very badly. So with a dry towel, we're just going to pull this guy out and give it a shake, a little shake. And I can see that it's bubbling a little bit right over here. And if you were to shake a frittata when it's raw in the center, the outside will stay still and the inside will give a little jiggle. But in this case, when we shake it, the entire thing kind of sticks together, and that is telling me that it's cooked all the way through. You can also use a cake tester or a skewer, and you can poke it in and pull it out, and just like you would test a cake, if it comes out clean and there's nothing stuck to it, all the egg is cooked. You can use the tip of your knife if you feel like poking through, just being careful not to scrape your pan. You can just kind of poke into the bottom and then pull it out, and you can see that there's no raw egg stuck to it, and that is a good indication that our frittata is completely cooked. So I'm going to turn off our oven, and really important, we're just going to let it sit for about 3 minutes here to cool and set. So, it's violent action going on in the oven, it's cooking, it's hot, and we just want it to come together before we turn it out, because sometimes when it's very, very hot, if it hasn't had a chance to sit, you turn it over and it can kind of fall apart, and that's not the goal. So, in the meantime, we can dress our salad. We've got our greens and just a few spoonfuls of our vinaigrette, and give ourselves a little toss. Obviously, one of the most important pieces of the puzzle whenever we're cooking is to taste our work and decide. Very delicious, but could use another spoonful of vinaigrette. And I wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't used my tongue to taste. So always taste our salad before we serve it. And we're actually going to serve this frittata really kind of rustically on this beautiful cutting board. So we're going to serve the frittata on the cutting board with the salad right on the side. However, I want to put the frittata on first, because the salad, in order to get the frittata out of the pan, I'm actually going to flip it over. And it's a very fun, exciting thing to do that I'm looking forward to showing and doing alongside of you, because if you're like me, you get very excited about flipping frittatas out of pans. So, we are going to take our cutting board, or whatever receptacle, if you wanted to put it on a plate, you would use a plate, and you're going to flip the presentation side onto the frying pan upside down, right in the place where you want your frittata to land. Then, using your dry towel, because remember, your frying pan just came out of the oven, so it is still hot, you're going to place whichever is your dominant hand on the handle, and your opposite hand you're going to hold whatever the receptacle is down flat, and then you're going to gently and slowly, just 1, 2, 3, flip your frittata over onto your board, and then lift your pan away, and you will see that your frittatas come out perfectly, and you're so excited. Whew! That was really nerve-wracking. Thank you. If your frittata didn't look that great, it means you're not a professional chef like I am. Sorry. So, I like to serve a frittata on a cutting board, because for me what I would do then is I would actually cut a slice out of it. Right? You can see that if I just carefully, because I don't want to smash through the onions, I want to cut through them so I can see the lines as we remove the slice. I would cut through maybe one slice, and then just like a cake, I would just slide it out, and you can see that all the beautiful pieces are in there, out to the side, and then we can put our salad right on the side. And that, for me, is a delicious summer lunch, brunch, late night breakfast, evening snack. Utilize all your vegetables. Make something that's absolutely amazing from nothing. Cheap, delicious meal. These particular flavors go really well together because they're just super traditional and classic. I mean, we're talking fennel, zucchini, red onions, and fresh herbs. There's absolutely nothing weird or strange about this. These are flavors you've seen 1,000 times. And like so many things that are classic, they're classic for a reason, because they're great. Be sure to like and subscribe, check us on Instagram, and download the Project Foodie app on the iOS App Store. I hope you've enjoyed this Project Foodie cook-along, and I hope you'll join us for more. So to make a delicious vegetable frittata with a side green salad, you will need the following ingredients. For the frittata, we're going to start with onion and fennel as the base, sweated in olive oil and butter, followed by zucchini, and then our eggs are going to be mixed with a secret ingredient, heavy cream, herbs like chives, parsley, arugula, tarragon, shallot, and a green salad made of mixed greens, mustard, vinegar, black pepper, kosher salt. If you want to make this amazing frittata, you are going to need the following tools. We have a oven-safe non-stick frying pan, which is extremely important non-stick because if your frittata sticks, it's kaputs. Mixing bowl, which is going to do double duty for both whisking eggs and then after we clean it for mixing our salad. A receptacle, measuring cups and measuring spoons, a knife and cutting board, a spoon for tasting or mixing or miscellaneous you know what, a small bowl for making a vinaigrette, a rubber spatula, and a whisk. And I pronounce that whisk because there's an H in whisk.